Laura managed a tight-lipped smile, and I recognized that I had left her with lingering doubts, a question mark that would resonate in the quiet moments that followed. The next time she contemplated the idea of slipping away, she would have to consider whether I would appear again, and that was merely the beginning. Over the following days, I meticulously outlined the next phase of my strategy, ensuring that she remained uncertain. I intentionally returned home earlier, prepared dinner, and tidied up the house, providing her with no reason to suspect that I was onto her. I even surprised her with a lavish bouquet of flowers at her office, which completely took her by surprise. "You didn't have to do that," she remarked that evening, offering a smile that I would have believed to be sincere had I not been aware of the truth. "Why not?" I replied with a casual shrug. "I just wanted to show you how much I value you." For a brief moment, her smile faltered, and I detected a hint of guilt in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure, murmuring a thank you as she placed the card into her purse. By the end of that week, it was evident that my actions were having an impact. Laura appeared more tense than usual, increasingly withdrawn, as if she were anticipating an inevitable revelation. I made it a point to observe her closely, noting the subtle changes in her behavior, the way she hesitated before responding to questions and the way she glanced at her phone, as if expecting something to occur. For the time being, I was satisfied to keep her in suspense. With each act of kindness, each lingering embrace, and gentle smile, I was tightening the noose, ensuring that when the moment arrived, she would fully comprehend the extent to which she had been manipulated, and I was certain that once she realized, there would be no escape for her. The more I observed Laura, the more intriguing her reactions became. It resembled watching a child attempting to conceal a falsehood. Each movement was just a touch too cautious, and every smile appeared slightly forced. She likely believed she was successfully masking her anxiety, yet I perceived everything, and it was unfolding perfectly. As Wednesday arrived, I positioned myself by the window in our living room, feigning interest in a book while, in truth, I was monitoring her car as it exited the driveway. She wore a navy blue dress that I had gifted her last Christmas, her hair elegantly pinned up, presenting herself as if she were about to meet a significant client. In a sense, she indeed was. I observed her vehicle vanish around the corner before I picked up my phone to make a brief call to the detective agency. They had already verified her meeting with Greg for that day, but I sought more than mere photographs. I required them to investigate further, to follow her inside and document everything. The individual on the other end assured me he would make the necessary arrangements, albeit for an additional fee. "Money is no object," I responded, "just ensure I receive all the information." Earlier that morning, I had contacted the motel where their meeting was scheduled, posing as someone needing to book a room for a business trip. The manager was eager to assist and provided me with all the pertinent details, including the name of the receptionist on duty and the ease with which their computer system could be accessed with the right incentive. A little extra cash persuaded him to allow the detective to install a discreet hidden camera in the room reserved by Laura and Greg. This setup would be temporary, of course, just sufficient to capture their clandestine affair in high definition. That evening, after yet another night of maintaining the facade of normalcy, I received the footage in a secure online file from the detective agency. I poured myself a drink, settled into my chair at the computer, and clicked on the video. There they were, sitting closely together, engaged in an intimate conversation as if they were the only two individuals in existence. Greg was laughing, his hand resting on her knee, while Laura looked at him with an expression I had not witnessed in years. They appeared genuinely happy, so at ease with one another that it was almost painful to observe. However, it was the way she gazed at him that hurt the most, that soft, adoring look she once reserved solely for me. I allowed the video to continue, capturing moments I knew would hold significance later. There was something profoundly satisfying about watching them, completely unaware of the camera, oblivious to the fact that their little world was being recorded. Each glance, each touch, each whisper served as a piece of ammunition that would prove useful in due time. When Laura returned home that evening, she greeted me with her customary warmth, a slight smile gracing her lips. I found myself wondering if she realized how transparent she had become, how every gesture betrayed her. She attempted to maintain a facade of normalcy, inquiring about my day and mentioning vague details about hers. It almost amused me how she neglected to provide specifics, relying on the assumption that I remained as oblivious as ever. I returned her smile, nodded, and engaged in small talk. "You've been busy lately," I remarked casually, observing her reaction closely. She hesitated for just a moment too long before forcing a quick smile. "Yeah, real estate's like that sometimes, feast or famine, right?" I replied, feigning interest in a magazine. "Well, I hope your client appreciates all the hard work you're putting in." I thought I detected a flicker of guilt in her expression, but she swiftly masked it, dismissing my comment with a laugh. I chose to let it slide, fully aware that every word and glance was merely adding fuel to the fire I was building beneath her. By the conclusion of that week, I resolved it was necessary to intensify my efforts. I aimed to create a rift between her and EGO, illustrating that her seemingly flawless fantasy was beginning to unravel. I could perceive her growing discomfort in my presence. She appeared restless and distracted, likely contemplating whether she had overstepped her bounds. This tension presented an ideal opportunity for my next maneuver. On Saturday morning, I visited a florist and ordered an extravagant bouquet of roses, her favorite. I ensured they would be delivered directly to her office, accompanied by a handwritten note that read, "For my one and only, forever yours, Jack." That evening, she returned home with the bouquet in her arms, smiling yet evidently on edge. She placed the flowers on the counter and embraced me, her tone overly appreciative as she remarked, "You didn't have to do this." I responded with a composed smile, stating, "I merely wanted to remind you of how much I value you. It has been a hectic few months for both of us." She gazed at me for a moment longer than necessary, as if searching my expression for something. Perhaps she was questioning whether I was aware of her situation or feeling a hint of guilt. Regardless, her reaction was worth every penny spent. As the days progressed, I observed her checking her phone with increasing frequency, texting with a slight frown, indicating that something was troubling her. It wasn't long before I intercepted a message exchanged between her and Greg. My strategy of using flowers and affection had successfully infiltrated their relationship, revealing fractures in her seemingly perfect affair. She texted him, "Can't talk much, Jack's being really attentive. I might have to lay low for a while." Greg's response was a disgruntled reply, clearly irritated by the disruption. I couldn't suppress a sense of smug satisfaction. I allowed him to remain in his own thoughts, believing this was merely the beginning of the situation, yet I was far from finished. On Wednesday, I took the initiative to cancel the motel reservation that had been arranged. I called under Greg's name, requesting the release of the room due to an emergency, and then calmly ended the call. When Wednesday arrived, Laura left for her usual showing, and I observed her departure, fully aware of her destination and the surprise that awaited her upon discovering there was no room reserved. I envisioned her expression, the irritation, and the mental gymnastics she would have to perform, perhaps questioning whether Greg had made an error. That evening, Laura returned home in a noticeably foul mood, her usual cheer absent. She dropped her bag with a sigh and avoided my gaze, mumbling something vague about a long day. "It must have been quite the show," I remarked, suppressing a smile. She shot me a fleeting glance, one that seemed almost suspicious, yet not enough to confront me directly. I watched her closely, noting how she struggled to meet my eyes and how her responses became terse and defensive. She was beginning to unravel. After dinner, I proposed watching a movie and deliberately sat close, placing her feet on my lap and offering her the kind of attention she likely thought I had forgotten. She appeared taken aback, her glances uncertain as if she were attempting to assess my motives. Nevertheless, I maintained my composure, playing the role of the attentive and loving husband. The following day, I intercepted another text. "I don't know what's going on with Jack lately, he's different, and it's unsettling." Greg's response was predictably self-absorbed. "It's probably just a phase. Let's meet on Friday instead." The simplicity of his reply brought a smile to my face. He believed he was in command, capable of manipulating her like a marionette. However, I had taken control and had no intention of relinquishing it. On Friday, they planned to meet at a new hotel, the Hyatt downtown. I swiftly made a call, posing as Greg, to cancel their reservation. I anticipated their arrival, only to find themselves without accommodation, and I could almost envision the irritated expression on Greg's face when Laura returned home that evening. She appeared more than just shaken, moving through the house in a daze, clearly frustrated. As she ascended to bed, she cast me a glance that was both inquisitive and apprehensive. I locked eyes with her for a moment, allowing her to ponder the extent of my knowledge. I sensed the power dynamic shifting, tilting in my favor with each passing day. The walls were closing in on her, and she was acutely aware of it, yet I was not prepared to release her from this predicament. No, my plans were just beginning, for this was not merely about ending the affair, it was about reclaiming what she had taken from me, piece by piece. When I was finished, she would fully comprehend the magnitude of her loss. By the following week, I could observe Laura beginning to unravel. Her once casual glances at her phone had transformed into anxious checks every few minutes, as if she were awaiting a message to soothe her nerves. She had started to avoid eye contact and seemed distracted, struggling to maintain a conversation with me and her clients. Her dinners with Greg were becoming shorter and less frequent, as he appeared to be losing patience. Their meetings had diminished, partly due to my meticulous orchestration of a series of minor yet relentless disruptions. Each disruption seemed insignificant on its own, but I understood that they were cumulatively creating fractures in the illusion Laura and Greg had built. With every act of sabotage and every foiled plan, those fractures were widening. This past Wednesday, I conceived the idea of orchestrating a more public scenario for Greg and Laura. If they intended to engage in their little affair around town, I would ensure they had an audience. From intercepting Laura's messages, I learned that she and Greg had arranged to meet at a park approximately 20 miles outside the city, away from any prying eyes. Consequently, I decided to drive there myself, parking in the same lot while remaining out of sight. I observed as they arrived, with Greg's arm casually draped around Laura's waist as they walked toward the trails, resembling any affectionate couple. Had I not been aware of their true intentions, I might have mistaken them for two lovebirds enjoying a midweek picnic. Once they ventured down the trail, I approached Greg's vehicle and discreetly placed several sticky notes on his windows, each inscribed with the message, "Someone is watching you." This subtle gesture was designed to strike a chord. Upon their return, he would have to remove each note, instilling a sense of paranoia that their clandestine activities were not as private as they believed. That evening, I intercepted a message from Greg to Laura expressing concern about the risks involved, suggesting they exercise greater caution. Laura's reply was filled with desperation, even bordering on pitiful, as she pleaded, "Please don't say that, I don't want to stop seeing you." It was gratifying to witness her anxiety, fully aware that she was grappling with the consequences of my actions. I could almost sense the fear emanating from their texts as they scrambled to devise a plan to continue their affair. However, my intentions were far from complete. This was merely the beginning of their unraveling. The following day, I initiated my next strategy, this time focusing directly on Laura. I had arranged for her sister, Megan, to make a surprise visit over the weekend. Given their close relationship and the infrequency of Megan's visits, I called her on Wednesday evening, adopting the role of the considerate husband, and casually mentioned that Laura would be delighted to have her stay for an extended weekend. Megan consented without a moment's thought, unaware of the turmoil I was about to unleash. On Friday morning, as Laura prepared to leave for a meeting, I casually dropped the news. "By the way, your sister is coming into town this weekend," I mentioned over breakfast, maintaining a nonchalant demeanor. "She plans to stay here until Sunday." Laura halted, her coffee cup suspended mid-air, clearly taken aback. "This weekend?" she stammered, visibly unsettled. "Yes, she called yesterday. I thought it would be a pleasant surprise," I replied, my smile concealing my true intentions. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she quickly realized that her plans with Greg would need to be postponed once more. She managed a smile, uttering something about how lovely it would be to spend time with her sister, but I recognized the underlying fury masked by her polite facade. This was precisely the reaction I sought. As if on cue, Megan arrived that afternoon, brimming with enthusiasm and entirely unaware of the tension her visit was creating. Laura was compelled to play the role of the gracious host, smiling and engaging in conversation while struggling to suppress her frustration. At one point, when Laura stepped away to take a call, I caught a glimpse of her on the patio, speaking in hushed tones to Greg. She had been attempting to reach him since the morning to rearrange their plans, but he had remained unresponsive, likely just as annoyed as she was. I observed her pacing, her voice dropping to a near-desperate whisper. "It's just one weekend, Greg," I heard her say. "I can't just tell her to leave." I watched as her shoulders sagged in resignation, and she nodded before ending the call, her expression a blend of anger and disappointment. Meanwhile, Megan was her usual exuberant self, and I played my role as the devoted husband, preparing a lavish dinner, keeping the conversation light, and noting how Laura's discomfort intensified with each passing hour. It was evident that she could not relax, her mind preoccupied with the disintegration of her plans right before her eyes. The following morning, I decided to escalate my efforts. Having spent several days experimenting with Laura's phone to find a method to disable it at critical moments, today marked my first significant trial. I replaced her phone battery with a non-functional one and waited, fully aware that when she inevitably attempted to reach Greg, she would discover her phone was inoperable. As anticipated, around mid-morning, she descended the stairs, visibly frustrated and clutching her unresponsive device. She muttered about needing to charge it, and I felt a sense of satisfaction as her plans to contact Greg fell apart. "You can use the landline," I suggested, concealing my smirk. She dismissed my offer with a wave. "It's fine, I'll charge it later," she replied curtly, clearly annoyed but trying to maintain her composure in front of Megan. Throughout that weekend, Laura found herself unable to reach Greg, compelled to maintain a facade for her sister. Meanwhile, Megan was blissfully unaware of the turmoil she had inadvertently contributed to. As the weekend progressed, I observed Laura becoming increasingly agitated, her smiles appeared forced, and her laughter lacked authenticity. On Sunday evening, after Megan finally departed, I discovered Laura in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, her expression a mix of exhaustion and frustration. "Tough weekend?" I inquired lightly, observing her closely. She shot me a look that was part exasperation, part defeat. "Just busy," she replied, struggling to meet my gaze. I offered her a sympathetic nod, my tone laced with feigned innocence. "Well, I'm glad Megan could visit. You two don't see each other often enough." Yeah, it was nice," she said, her voice lacking any real conviction. I could see the cracks beginning to show, her patience wearing thin. She was ensnared in a game she was unaware she was playing, and I relished every moment of it. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, I reviewed the landline recording, my little safeguard in case she attempted to call Greg from the house phone. As expected, I found a call from Sunday morning at 7 a.m. The conversation was brief yet revealing, with Laura expressing her frustration and disappointment regarding her sister's unexpected visit. Greg, however, appeared dismissive, brushing aside her apologies with an impatient tone. "This is getting too complicated," he remarked sharply. "Maybe it's just not worth it." Laura's response was filled with desperation, almost pleading. "Please don't say that. I'll make it up to you, I promise. Just give me a little more time." She saved the recording, knowing it would prove useful later. Greg's patience was evidently wearing thin, and Laura began to panic, desperately trying to maintain control over the fragments of her affair. The following Monday, I intercepted another text from Greg. "I'm not sure we should keep doing this. It's getting too risky, and your husband seems different." Laura's reply was frantic, a stark departure from her usual composed demeanor. "Please don't end this. It's just a rough patch. I can make it work, I promise." Greg's response was curt, almost cold. "I'll think about it." Laura's once ideal affair was slipping away, and I observed as each piece fell apart. The fantasy she had constructed was turning to ash, and she remained oblivious to the fact that I was the one igniting the flames. When she returned home that evening, I deliberately sat beside her on the couch and turned on her favorite show. She glanced at me, slightly surprised, as if noticing me for the first time. You know, I said casually, I really am grateful for you, Laura. She blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in my voice. Thank you, Jack, she replied hesitantly, her face flushing slightly. I leaned over and kissed her on the cheek, observing as she shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of guilt crossing her expression.